Just one last question. Are you replacing Rohit Sharma for next Cricket World Cup?
And that also like yo-yo test, right? Like he had failed. And then I thought, okay, why people are failing this test, right? Then let me do it. One of the stats was around running also. So I have done that exact yo-yo test myself and I have passed it. So
Why?
maybe I think working, right? Okay, so I think last time I presented in VMUG Pune was I think 4 years back. That was anniversary event and it was really mega event and kind of micro VMworld kind of experience it was. And I think today the number of people here are way more than even that event also. So great to see all of you here. I heard that for this event we haven't that announced this time. So I think that also shows a lot of efforts over the years from all the leaders that without even announcing the event that largely, people are just turning up and they really see the value. Okay, with that, so today I'm going to talk about the topic VMware Tanzu and specifically more on vSphere with Tanzu. So when it comes to agenda, I'll be focusing on cloud native apps, what really is, right? Like there is a lot of talk around cloud native modern apps, all those stuffs, and how it connects to VMware Tanzu. Then what are the key pillars that we have in VMware Tanzu as a portfolio? And then where does vSphere with Tanzu comes under VMware Tanzu as an overall portfolio? Then a little bit more focused on building blocks of vSphere with Tanzu. vSphere with Tanzu, also called as WCP, if you know that WCP was an internal name, vSphere with Tanzu is an external facing name. And then I would like to spend a lot of time around demo, how it actually works from the customer perspective, all the workflows and all. Let's see how it goes. So we have around next 45 minutes, I hope. Okay, so before we move on, I just want to introduce myself. I started my journey with VMware way back, 11 years back as an intern. And I have been part of VMware since then and part of the same team as well. So nothing has changed. Right now, I am working as a staff engineer too in CIBG, largely focused on vSphere, particularly vCenter, vSphere with Tanzu, partly VMC because it's all interconnected, and VCF also. And then I have been a vExpert, so I was lucky enough to get introduced to community like this way back when I joined. And that further introduced me to vExpert program. And last 9 years, I have been a vExpert. And under vExpert, you might know there are some sub-programs focused on particular VMware priorities, such as modern apps, as well as VMC. So last year, I had an opportunity to be part of those also. And when it comes to contribution to community, my major contribution goes through the blog, wethinkbeyondvm.com, which is again focused on the areas that I work on. So I align what I work on and what I write here also, and largely around automation around vSphere. Then lately I got some interest into video making also. So I started a YouTube channel, and this is my. Apart from that, I am big into cricket. So I'm not working not with family, then I'm into cricket. And then with pandemic, I started with cycling, running, and now I aspire to be Ironman one day. And then usually I show this stat also. This is my cricketing stats. Those are recorded. So here if you see 78 matches, but I think I might have played 1,000 matches plus so far. And one of the things I wanted to highlight here was the win and loss percentage is very close. So there is lots, and then everything is fine. When you lose also, it's fine. Right? So, and then another thing I take pride in, like I have hit more sixes than fours. So that is one. And last year's stat, I was looking into Strava app where I track all my activity. And this is something I thought I will also show you when it comes to cycling and running as well. So with that, let's start with actual presentation. So first, we are going to talk about what is this cloud native apps, right? So this is just an introduction to that. And as you know, like every business out there, eventually somewhere is connected to software. So every business is kind of a software business. And now if you see insurance, education, multiple areas of them, everywhere there is a software. Now let's talk about traditional app before we jump into cloud native apps. Now if you see, here is a monolithic application approach that was a past traditional apps. We say we had one platform, multiple functionalities into that app, and each of them were developed as a module, but built on single platform, and multiple developers are contributing to the same code base. And then the challenge with that were these four, like lack of choice of the platform, then speed, right? Like when you want to scale, you want to vertically scale or horizontally scale, you want to release faster. Everywhere there was a problem with when it comes to speed. And a lot of caution was required because multiple developers are checking in the code. So we have to be very cautious about it and hard to scale as well. So I think all these problems are very well known with the traditional apps, and that's why now we are talking about modern apps. Now, okay, then what is big picture around cloud native apps? So I would just pause for a few seconds for you to just read this statement. Basically, it says that you just exploit the cloud computing model out there. And how do we do that? So first thing is your app must be containerized. And then there are multiple advantages with making any app containerized, such as package with dependency, independent of environment, highly portable, scalable, and example, the well-known Docker engine. So your app should be containerized when it comes to cloud native apps. And that is how you will be exploiting the cloud native model, the cloud computing model. Second one is microservice oriented. So earlier we saw the traditional app that was monolithic app, everything is built into single code base. Now to exploit the cloud computing model, the app must be microservice. Every functionality is developed as a single service. It can be deployed independently. It exposes its own REST APIs so that it can talk to some other service from the same app. So one app can have multiple microservices. Then last one is dynamically orchestrated. It has to be, then just making your app containerized and microservice based was not enough. And that is where the Kubernetes like framework came into picture when it came to dynamically load balancing, monitoring, scaling, authentication manager, and so forth. So if your app is following, if it is containerized, microservice based, and managed through the orchestrator like Kubernetes, then you'll be able to exploit cloud computing model, and that will become your cloud native app. Now here is an example of cloud native app. The same app, if you see here, I think we can focus on few things. If you see here, there are multiple colors over here. One color is VMware Cloud on Dell EMC, AWS, VMC on AWS, Azure. So what does it mean is that microservice, the single microservice can run on multiple clouds also, the multi-cloud. Now, how do they choose that? It's up to that the business logic of that particular app. Why they will go with some service into one particular cloud, it's up to them. So this is just an example. This is not just a typical like always followed architecture, but this is one of the examples. It can happen that the same app is containerized, microservice based, but it's running on a single cloud also. But this is one of the examples of. And again, second thing you see, so one is multi-cloud, second is multi-platform. One is in Django, Go, gRPC, .NET. So now every microservice can be developed independently, run independently, manage independently. It exposes recipes. Now how it is developed, nobody cares. It can also happen that microservice, right, is not following containerized. Some companies might do it. For example, let's say GPay. Now Google Pay is from Google. And now when you check the balance, it has to make a call to a particular branch, bank that you have registered with. Now the bank also has to expose their API for GP to use. Now the bank, whether bank is running that particular service, which is a microservice based or containerized, it doesn't matter. How they are doing, it's up to them. But largely, if they want to really exploit cloud, then they might do it. And then GPay functionality can be also divided into multiple things. One is transferring from one account to the other account. Another is checking the balance. Usually checking the balance has a lot of traffic, right? So they might want to maintain that and then manage the scale. So, and then the Kubernetes part, from deployment, scaling, and management, Kubernetes is being used. So I hope this first 5-6 minutes have given you some insights, very clear, like layman terms. I don't want to go into little more details and deep dive into an internals, but this has given you more context, and all of those better resiliency, greater velocity, choice, and scalability, all of that is simplified. Okay, now VMware Tanzu. So VMware Tanzu is a portfolio addressing this cloud native apps, modern apps, and it has multiple products. Particularly, it has 3 key pillars. One is build, run, manage. Now, when it comes to cloud native app, you have to build the app, right? How do you build it? So what we can do under build is what the build pillar. So there are multiple products under build itself. Second one is once you have built the app, you have to run that app somewhere. Again, the platform. So there are multiple offerings under run pillar. Third one is once it is running, you'll have to manage it, right? You want to do lifecycle management, you want to do monitoring, right? You want to apply security policies. All that stuff comes under manage. And each of these pillars have multiple products. And the focus of our talk is on run. And that's where the vSphere with Tanzu fits in. Okay, one example of build I would give you. Tanzu application platform is one of the key products under Tanzu portfolio. Then if you see this pipeline, right, the chain, supply chain, there is a dev, there is a sec, and there is ops. Nowadays we say, right, dev, sec, ops. Earlier it was DevOps only. So here the first part is the developer has to build the app. So whatever he wants, like he wants to learn something, he wants to discover and start, he needs some ready-made templates. Let's say I'm developing some plugin for WordPress. Now WordPress is a CMS. I need that base image and then I want to build a plugin on the top of that. Now from where you'll get that base CMS, the WordPress. Then Tanzu application platform, Tanzu application catalog, there is a catalog. So there is app accelerator is something cloud native app is already built for you as a sample. You come in, just deploy it, integrate into your IDE, integrated development environment, and you build your business logic on the top of that. So everything is ready, dependencies are sorted, the framework is ready. You just come there and you just focus on your business logic. So that is the job of dev. And then once the dev has developed, then he has to debug, iterate, that process will start. Every aspect of that development lifecycle, that is dev. Then when it comes to deploying it, then checking whether the image is certifying the security aspect of it and all those sort of things, the security people are scanning, the signing and storing the image from where it is coming and all, staging environment, then production environment, and then running eventually on some Kubernetes aspect. So the Tanzu application platform helps in this, all these aspects. So this is one of the examples, and all of them are interrelated. In fact, from managed perspective, I just wanted to highlight the Tanzu mission control. Now in this, if you see whatever is listed in the first column, all of them are Kubernetes clusters. And now if you see the fourth provider, if you see there are some vSphere, some AWS, some OpenShift, Google Cloud, and Azure also. So Tanzu mission control helps you manage Kubernetes-based workloads across any cloud. So this is a classic example of a multi-cloud SaaS offering from VMware, Tanzu mission control. So if you want to apply some security policy by your company across all the Kubernetes clusters that are deployed, and there are apps running inside that. So your microservice app, some of that is running in vSphere, some of that it can also happen, the way we have seen the examples. So this is just one very high level, big picture around how managed looks like, the monitoring aspect, and so many things are there. And this is where we are going to focus a little more today. So underrun Kubernetes story, as you might be following VMware, right? Some history about it. We had acquisition of Pivotal, then we had Heptio, and then we had our VMware grown Kubernetes offering also that is integrated in vSphere directly. So these three variants are there. Pivotal variant was called as TKGI integrated, then Heptio TKGM multi-cloud, TKGS, and now all of them over the time based on the feedback from the customer is getting unified. Now currently there are two offerings, TKGM, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid multi-cloud, that can run independent of vSphere. It can run on the top of vSphere, but it can also directly run on GCP or some other clouds also. And then TKGS is a native integration of Kubernetes into vSphere platform, TKGS. And then consistent Kubernetes, the same code base in vSphere 8.0, the TKG coming from this different, all that code base is now integrated, it's called as TKG 2.0. So the same offering is offered between TKGM and TKGS. And then internally, there are multiple offerings from the infrastructure perspective. Right? One is vSphere, native, the on-prem VCF. We have clouds, the multi-clouds, the hyperscalers, the edge. Everywhere the same integration and the same Kubernetes cluster will run. So it's a consistent experience for the customers. So they can go from any cloud to anywhere. Okay, now we are moving into a lot more focused on vSphere with Tanzu. Here now, I think this is just a very high level view on how the vSphere cluster, supervisor cluster, and guest clusters are related. And now vCenter you all know, and then we have multiple ESX boxes that you all know. The same vSphere cluster becomes a supervisor cluster. When that can happen, for that we have to enable vSphere with Tanzu on that particular cluster. That same cluster becomes a Kubernetes cluster called as supervisor cluster. Now that supervisor cluster is a Kubernetes cluster, also your traditional vSphere cluster. So you can run your traditional apps, the VMs, as well as Kubernetes based workloads. I was very fascinated with this kind of, because we had, now as you can see, the huge the customer base, right? For them, they were asking, okay, what is my way to modern apps, right? Within vSphere, I am fully into vSphere. Now, that was the answer from VMware, that now Kubernetes is natively integrated. So your same cluster becomes Kubernetes cluster. It works for traditional VMs and even for modern apps based. Then how that happens is, just on high level, each ESX box becomes, in Kubernetes, as you know, there are two aspects: control plane VMs, worker nodes. Control plane VMs drives all that logic, and actual workloads run on worker nodes. Now in upstream Kubernetes, we have kubelet. When kubelet gets installed, that particular node becomes a worker node. In this case, the same kubelet is little stripped down. The modified version of the kubelet is a spearlet. The spearlet gets installed into each ESX, and ESX becomes the worker node. And that's how we become. So that is a supervisor cluster, vSphere cluster. Now when it comes here, if you see, there is one more called as guest cluster. Now, when it comes to supervisor cluster, there were multiple integrations with the native vSphere layer that I will be talking about shortly. What are those? Then it wasn't like very equivalent to how the upstream Kubernetes is. So then customer also needed very upstream compliant Kubernetes cluster without any customizations and all that. And that is where the guest cluster part comes in. TKG, Tanzu Kubernetes, Grid, yes, service. And that is what is a guest clusters. Now the beauty is, you have vSphere cluster which runs virtual machines. Then the same cluster becomes a supervisor cluster. On supervisor cluster, you can have multiple Kubernetes clusters, and Kubernetes cluster also guest cluster. So you have two versions of Kubernetes now. One is a supervisor layer, which is a foundation. Customer can choose to run their application directly on supervisor cluster also. In that case, your app is directly running on ESX boxes as a worker node. Because in Kubernetes, essentially, eventually your workload will run in a worker node. Then if you want very compliant, the upstream experience, then guest cluster is your answer. So there you can run. So this is, and then namespaces is very equivalent to resourceful. We'll look at that into demo. Okay, so there are multiple variants of vSphere with Tanzu, as some of you might be knowing, with VMware NSX. So WCP with NSX or vSphere with Tanzu with NSX, where for all networking related services, NSX is being used. So that is the first. And the same, the last point, if you see the VMware Cloud and VCF, automatically, like by default, as a part of architecture itself, comes with NSX. So the vSphere with Tanzu is supported on VCF also and VMware Cloud on AWS also. So it will be NSXT based. Second one is a lot of customers were not using NSX, vSphere based, right? So then that would have forced them to deploy NSX. Then kind of expertise required for NSX also is very equivalent to how vSphere admin is managing the VMware infrastructure. Then we needed alternative, how the same vSphere networking, that is virtual distributed switch, can work for the same functionality. But for that, the vSphere doesn't natively support some networking services. For example, load balancer is one of the key things in Kubernetes. And HA proxy, load balancer based vSphere with Tanzu is another variant. HA proxy is a load balancer which is open source. The next one is VMware NSX advanced load balancer. That is also called as AVI balancer, that came from AVI networks. So then another version, like alternative to HA proxy, is NSX, the vSphere with Tanzu with AVI load balancer, or now it is renamed as NSX advanced load balancer. And then same is integrated with VMware Cloud also and VCF also. There it is further simplified. So if you're doing directly on vSphere and then you're doing on VMware Cloud, it is further simplified because the stack is taken care, right? In case of VCF also and in case of VMware Cloud also. VMware Cloud takes it to the next level. In fact, the VCF is managing the life cycle of your building blocks of SDC. And VMware Cloud is a service. So everything is managed for you. Further simplification is also done. Okay, so little bit I wanted to spend some time. I see that a lot of customers have some not concern, but the confusions around the life cycle of vSphere, the same vSphere that you used to upgrade. Now, if I have vSphere with Tanzu enabled, then how it works, right? And here some examples are there. So you don't need to get confused with all this. So example number one. So you want to upgrade from one VC version to the next VC version, right? With Supervisor cluster. Now we are only focused for Supervisor, not guest clusters, okay? And Supervisor is delivered as a part of vCenter releases. So every vCenter release happens, Supervisor cluster related building blocks are bundled with vCenter. And each of the vCenter release supports 3 versions of Kubernetes. Now, that is how the support in upstream Kubernetes also. 3 versions are always supported. The 4th one gets then end of life and then next release comes up. So every 4 months they release one release of Kubernetes. So in a year there are 3 Kubernetes are released now. Earlier I think it was 4. So one VC has 3 versions, say 1.14, 15 and 16. And the next VC has again got 3 versions, right? It might overlap like this, 1.16, 17 and 18. When you install for the first time, it will get the latest version of Kubernetes. So if it is overlapping, you can upgrade the way you are upgrading your vCenter. Second example, here it is not overlapping. 16 is there, but the next version supports 17, 18, 19. In that case also, this is supported. You can upgrade your vCenter from this version to that version. What will happen is you don't need to upgrade Kubernetes version. It will auto upgrade itself. If the version on the previous VC is not supported on the target VC, and if it is immediate, 1.16 to 1.17, then it is supported VMware. As soon as vCenter gets upgraded, it will get automatically upgraded. And in Kubernetes world, they don't support skipping the minor version. minor here is 16 or 17. So you can't go from 1.16 to 1.18 directly. So you have to go sequentially. And there comes this kind of situation where there is no overlapping and it's not immediate also, like example 2. In that case, you'll have to hop from one VC to the next intermediate VC, and from there, where it is supported, you have to come back to this kind of scenario, then only that is supported. Otherwise, your vCenter bridge check will fail. And then now from here, you can understand that from the support policy perspective, right? Any VC major release is supported for 5 years. But that may not be the case here, right? vCenter itself will be supported for 5 years. But in order to keep up with the upstream Kubernetes, you have to keep going. You will not be like in the past, like now also we see some vSphere 5.0 also, right? Even though it is more than 5 years. But here you will have to run faster, because that's why you want to go to cloud native apps, right? You want to run faster. And here also you have to be faster. Then that is for supervisor and its support policy. So it's around within 1 year, you have to think about upgrading your vCenter supervisor cluster. The guest cluster, which gets deployed on the top of it, its life cycle, it's not delivered as a part of the vCenter release. It's independent cadence. It is delivered in a content delivery network as a OVAs, which you can have synced with your vCenter through content library. So you can create content library and subscribe to that CDN. And you get all that, and that I will show you in the demos. Okay. Now it's a demo. And how much time? Okay. So I have one more thing. But I thought I will go with the demo first. That was a lot more deeper. Can you pause from here also? I don't know. Okay. So here what I'm showing is your regular vCenter with one cluster in there. There are 3 hosts, right? Okay. So there are 3 hosts. Then as I was saying, right, in Kubernetes, there are 2 aspects. One is control plane. Control planes are virtual machines in case of supervisor. And your host becomes worker nodes. Okay. And now that host, I'm showing it as a, it will show like that. Okay, supervisor host node. If this is what something you see and all is green, then that host has become your worker node for supervisor cluster. And then workload management is a new UI for everything about vSphere Tanzu. Here, okay, this is the cluster on which it is enabled already. And here, if you see the overview, it is running with this version of Kubernetes 1.23.5, and that comes from vCenter itself, the supervisor. Then these are the nodes. Nodes means the 3 control plane VMs and 3 hosts. In Kubernetes, when you do kubectl get nodes, so get control plane nodes and worker nodes also. That is what. Here, what I'm showing is, little pause. Here, what I'm showing is like how there are 2 personas, right? One is vSphere admin, the regular admin. Another is somebody has to consume this, right? That is a DevOps or a developer. And now how I can get this ready for him to consume or her to consume. For that, you have enabled vSphere Tanzu, your cluster is up and running, everything is fine. Now I have to, let's say there is one developer and they want one Kubernetes cluster to deploy their app and test and all that. For that, we have to give some portion of the resources to him to deploy his workloads, right? Something very similar to resource pools, right? We used to divide the cluster resources into resource pools and then provide access to them through SSO users and have roles and permissions so that those particular those set of users will have access to only that resource pool. Something very similar, this namespace service, self-service, where it is already enabled. So I will just show you that how that resource pool in the backend is leveraged for vSphere Tanzu. So here you can provide, okay, CPU, memory, storage for that particular template. the storage it has to use, the VM classes. The VM class is interesting where I want to create a VM in traditional environment. Also, I need a 2 GB VM and 2 vCPUs, right? That is a VM class. So that kind of VMs. So you can have multiple VM classes already defined by VMware. So you have to just allocate that. Okay, if you are giving this service to the developers, right? While he is deploying his workloads, he can use these VM classes. Then content library. Now content library for guest clusters. If they want to play around guest clusters and deploy by their own, supervisor cluster is managed by vSphere admin. Guest cluster is managed by developer himself. And then here we are giving permissions. So who are those dev? You can say finance team wants this sort of configuration. And we are giving, and then it is coming from identity source. The identity source can be local vSphere.local or any identity source that you have configured in the vCenter itself. And once this is ready, now I'm not sure this, now this is an interface for developer. Now how, okay, you can pause for a while. Once the vSphere side is ready and the template is created, now there are clients. Clients means the developers. They need to access these services, right? For that, this can be looked as a client, and VMware provides one plugin called as vSphere kubectl plugin. There are evolution happen now. There is a Tanzu CLI also available with even this plugin also. So there is one URL will be provided to developer, the client, whoever is a client, and that URL will help you download that plugin. So that plugin is already downloaded in this location. The root is already downloaded. That will allow you to connect to supervisor cluster. So this is a gateway machine from where the networking is configured in a way that it is able to reach the vCenter and all the networking configured on vSphere with Tanzu. Yeah. Once the path is set, the next command is about logging in. So I'm now logging in the DevOps@vSphere.local, the same user that was configured with the self-service. And I'm changing the context to existing namespace. Towards the end of this demo, you will get the connect these dots also. So basically what now I'm doing is, I would like to deploy one single vSphere pod that is running directly on supervisor cluster. Okay, so I'm just taking one command that deploys the nginx container-based workload inside of vSphere pods. Anything running directly on supervisor cluster is called as vSphere pods. The reason is it's a customized from the vSphere side. Ideally, in the Kubernetes world, it's a pod. So you deployed that from the kubectl. The developer has done his application running around nginx. Now, how it will look in vSphere? So that was a namespace I had chosen as a developer to deploy this, and this is how it will look like. It is looking like a virtual machine, right? It's a very stripped version of the same virtual machine. In virtual machine, we have VMX. Here it is a CRX, but it's a very, very stripped version. It comes back within few seconds because the pods also, right? The upstream pods comes within fraction of seconds, comes up. Unlike virtual machine might take some few minutes to come up. And then, okay, it is coming back into running state. So this is how the developer has deployed their app on supervisor. So this is one part of it. The next one is a guest cluster. I was talking about having a Kubernetes cluster directly on the top of supervisor cluster. So in case of guest cluster, the both control plane and worker nodes are all about VM form factor. In case of supervisor, ESX server were workers and virtual machines were control planes. And in case of guest cluster, both of them are virtual machine based. And that is how if you go to even AWS or GCP or any other public clouds, guest cluster, you need a Kubernetes cluster as a service, you will be getting virtual machine based only. So here, okay, I think here was one mistake.
Create NS.
Yeah, correct. So here what I'm showing is the developer themselves can create a namespace also. The namespace that was shown under which, like, it's a resource pool under which I'm deploying. Now that template that I was showing initially, 20 GB RAM and the CPUs and all that, that can get further divided by the developer. So developer one might create his own namespace and deploy his own Kubernetes cluster. So here, so kubectl create NS stand for namespace, and I'm giving some name VMUG Pune. Now that call will go to supervisor layer, and the namespace will be created there. So for the developer doesn't have visibility into this UI. So if you see here, the developer has deployed. The vSphere admin able to see what is happening. Now, guest clusters. Now, I was talking about a content library. I think all of you know about content library. Content library can be subscribed to some external remote sources also. So the guest clusters are delivered through that content library independent of vCenter, vSphere releases. And this is how the content library you create and subscribe to that. You get all versions of Kubernetes directly here. They are directly very equivalent to what upstream Kubernetes is there. It's just bundle and few tests around that is done. And this is how it will look like. The URL I will just show you. This wp-content.vmware, which is here. So you can also access and see that this is public facing URL. You can subscribe into vCenter to get those. And once you have subscribed, then you have to let your developer know, okay, now I have subscribed and it is ready for his consumption. And he can choose any version that is supported. Now we are coming back to the same interface that developer is going to use. This is a YAML file. In Kubernetes, as you might know, it's all about desired state. So I have to let system that, okay, this is my desired state. This is my VM class. This is a guest cluster. So everything is VM form factor. So I have to say the best effort small. So that is a VM class, the storage class, the networking, the version of the Kubernetes, all that is defined in the that YAML file. And now I have to trigger the guest cluster creation. That is being managed by developer, the life cycle of that. They can create also and delete also. So kubectl, okay, here. Now how he can know that what are the VM classes available to me? Because he doesn't have access to vSphere side VM classes. VM classes is like t-shirt sizes, right? So kubectl get virtual machine classes will list you. These are the things available to particular developer. And the vSphere admin can manage, they can just give two, because if you give something guaranteed also there is, they can misuse your resources. So admin has to properly assess the requirement, why you are using is for test or dev or production, what is like all that. And then next is the developer also needs to know what are the Kubernetes version available, right? Because they don't have access to vCenter. This is another command, virtual machine images. So this is what available to them. And they have got the YAML. So from that, they deployed, triggered that, and this is how under the same one of the namespace, same namespace can be used for guest cluster deployment or a vSphere pod directly on the supervisor cluster. Only thing is the virtual machine you may not be able to deploy under that namespace, but outside directly on the hosts. Or you create your resource pool and create there. And this is how it will look like, the guest cluster. The further, one of the thing that I want to introduce is the vSphere zones. I think this is a new inventory object that is introduced in vSphere 8.0. There was a concern that I have deployed vSphere Tanzu on a cluster and that cluster goes down. Everything will be down, right? Then to increase that resiliency, now in public cloud, you might know there are regions, availability zones, right? On that, we wanted to have some functionality directly natively into vSphere, because their workloads at public cloud are protected across availability zone under a region, right? on that front, the vSphere zone was introduced. So vSphere zone is nothing but vSphere zone is nothing but you associate zone number one with one or more clusters. Now those clusters can come from different data centers you have. Somebody, some data center in Pune or something else outside also. So there are, if you see, there are 3 clusters, and then in this setup we have divided into 3 zones. Okay, and here I'm just creating a sample zone, and let's say Pune data center. So 3 zones are already created. This is the 4th one. It will detect, okay, this is the only one cluster which is not yet associated with any zones. So you go ahead and create. So this is how it will look like. The VMUG Pune as a availability zone. Now we have to let vSphere with Tanzu know that I have vSphere zone based setup. So my workload should go across 3. So what happens is, so it's already enabled on that. Here what I'm showing is, if you are enabling for the first time, how the workflow will look like. So here in the UI workflow, when you are enabling vSphere with Tanzu for the first time on vSphere zones, here is where you have to give that data. The cluster that I had chosen was incompatible because the few things were not enabled, like HA wasn't there, DRS, it is not configured in NSX. So it is incompatible, it will detect. So that was just an example. So now we are just skipping. Then enabling vSphere with Tanzu has to go through all this storage, network, management, network, and all that vSphere zones. And then you enable. So that was already enabled. Now, if you see here, the cluster 1 has got only one control plane from supervisor. The second one got into the second one. The third one. If at all the first one goes down, one data center, your services are still up and running because the control plane from the Kubernetes is serving your API requests, any workload requests that guest cluster coming in or vSphere pod coming in, it will do it. Now let's say I'm creating a namespace. There are 2 ways to create namespace. One is vSphere admin themselves can create, or the self-service namespace that I have talked, where developers themselves can create namespace also. Both of them are. This was initial, and later feedback was that that control needs to be given to the developers, and that also has come up. Now this namespace we created, it got into 3 of the clusters. 1, 2, 3. So when you deploy, let's say a deployment from the Kubernetes side, and you have defined 3 replicas, it can go into 3 different zones. When something is down, then desired state will detect that, okay, one replica is not running. Then the third one, which is down, will get deployed on the rest of the 2 zones. And again, the vSphere, DRS and all, that goodness of the vSphere, the real is also there. Then, okay, this is the last part, how we trigger the Kubernetes upgrades in supervisor. This is about supervisor. I said like there are 3 versions bundled in the vCenter. So here is the latest version, 1.24. Yeah. Then there are 3 versions, 24, 23, and 22. Now, how do you simply trigger this? Unlike vCenter, a lot of planning is required. Right? Here there is nothing. You just select the cluster, what is the current version, and what is the available version in this setup. So this is the available version, 1.24. You can go only forward, and you can't skip. And you just say apply updates. And there are 3 control planes right now. They are deployed with 1.23 version, the existing version. Now 1.24, it is a rolling upgrade. It will deploy first the 4th VM. It will get ready with 1.24, join the cluster. Once it is all running, then it will delete one of the VMs. Then always there will be 4 VMs. Now that's what I wanted to share. So the upgrade has started, so it will show in the percentage. So first the control planes VL will get with the 1.24 version. Then ESX host, the Spearlet that I was talking, right? Spearlet is delivered as a web. In ESX, everything is a web, right? And that is pushed by vCenter into ESX. And as a part of this upgrade, the newer version of Spearlet will get pushed. So here I was wanted to show that where is the 4th VM, the first Yeah, so this is how the fourth VM will first come, deploy, and then proceed. Yeah, the demo is done. If you have 4 minutes or 3-4 minutes, we can look about one more slide. So if you see there are multiple integrations with the vSphere from the supervisor perspective. The products wise, right, the simplified offering is with vSphere Plus also. The vSphere Plus, you know, by now, the project Arctic, vSphere Plus integration from the vSphere Tanzu is also there. The VCF integration is there, VMware Cloud on AWS also is further simplified. Then now this is native to vSphere. There is one service called as WCP service introduced. It's like any other vCenter service that orchestrate all the workflows like enabling vSphere with Tanzu, upgrading, creating namespace. Any operation that you do in vSphere is driven by the WCP service. So that has to be up and running always. Then there are APIs. The authentication, those users and all the same SSO authentication will work. The identity sources and vSphere.local, the local SSO domain that we have. The vSphere client that I was showing all the new UI with respect to vSphere client. This is one of the fascinating feature, VMOps, the VM service. Now you are deploying virtual machines through API or from UI directly create VM. Now I want the Kubernetes goodness for my VMs. There are some hybrid apps where some of the aspect of that hybrid apps are running inside a VM, the rest of them are running in a pod. Now the developer wants that control. Instead, database is going to be running in the virtual machine. They can now from the kubectl create virtual machine and define in YAML, provide the replica. Okay, I need 3, and it will use the same goodness of vSphere to have VM service also. And you can have your own OVS like the images, the Linux distro like Ubuntu, CentOS, Photon, and so forth. Where that has whatever is available to vSphere pod, the pods in Kubernetes eventually will be available for virtual machines also. Now this is just a start, and a lot of progress has made. I think till like 7x release entire, 8x also is out. So a lot of progress on VM also has happened. Resource management I talked about. From storage perspective, there are storage policies, tagging and the first class disk are being integrated. Network side, VDS and LS60 that I was talking about. ES6 Peerlet we talked. EM extension agency manager manages the life cycle of deploying those control plane VMs and even the guest cluster VMs. That is an existing vSphere functionality. vSphere zones we talked about. vCenter backup and restore. They will be responsible for anything deployed on vCenter side, not the Kubernetes aspect. When you deploy a Kubernetes has its own backup and restore story, Velero and some other solutions. So that you will have to integrate. And this is the last slide. If you want to learn more about vSphere with Tanzu specialist exam, that will make you like whatever I'm talking after working on that and passing that exam. So I have shared my all experience in this one of my blogs. If you want to automate all the aspects of supervisor cluster, the second blog. Third one is if you want to have some hands-on lab without even deploying all this, hands-on lab is there from VMware. Upgrade and support policy, I think is one of the important things we as a vSphere admin has to understand, because in the past we were we were able to wait longer. Now we will not be able to longer, and it will lead to maintenance cycles. The next, the cloud consumption service is a very exciting thing I would like you to check. This is coming as a service in RT, project RT. I think it is already available, already public. So I would like you to take a look at this blog also. How the whatever I talked, right, is taken to the next level and made very simplified. Then Tanzu official site to learn anything about Tanzu. And if you want to contact me, these are my contacts. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for question and answer. Any question?
Can you hear me, Vikas?
Yeah.
Only one question. You blog a lot, and I realized that you do a lot of fitness tutorials.
Yeah. So
Balance.
okay, how do I balance? Okay, so a few days back I was looking at my stats for 2022, and one of the stats I was showing, right, one of the things I was fascinated was that out of 365 days, I was active for 274 days last year. And it did not include the cricket because Strava doesn't have that option to record it. And then when we are playing cricket, right, and that is one of my passion outside what I do. So it's just a regular routine I have developed. Without that, my day doesn't go forward. And then there are, we live in a community where, like how this is grown, right? Where I live, the active community for cycling, running. I am into cricket, so we organize cricket. So it's like environment is also there. And then prayer. At the end of the day, like to like perform like, and then I think the reason I wanted to show that cricket, a lot of things from cricket I have brought back into my work also. And the winning, losing, and then you have to perform, right? I used to work for 6 days in a gym, just that I will perform better on the Sunday playing cricket. Then I thought, okay, I think I have to do better in my job also because that is my primary. And I to keep that engine going, and this is required. So we have to prioritize. I think we have to work on what matters the most also. I'm in the very initial journey. And I'm going to start one YouTube channel for only personal development also. So whatever I do, recycling and all that, apart from this. So
I think the core message here is join communities.
yeah.
Great.
And in VMware, I think, let me take one more. We have started within VMware, people within VMware are lucky. We have started authors community in VMware. And I am one of the leads with others. We are making them authors. And then like we are sharing A to Z about the blogging, the video making and anything. And that way there are speaker community. So it's all about communities. Only motivation will not work. The people around you that will push you.
Because
Basically, man is a social animal. So we need some push from the community in whatever we do, right? I think that's the gist. Join community, and the most important part is just show up.
Yeah.
So, because most of the people, the hardest thing is to break the ice.
Actually, that 274 days I was talking about, right? The show up, and that one word I really like. I decided, okay, initially I was like 60 minutes, 90 minutes, I will do the gym. It wasn't working. Like 1 week I was doing, then I'm not doing. And I just said, okay, I will just show up. 2 minutes, 10 minutes, no matter, 30 minutes. Wherever I am in my sets and all that, right? I will drop that. 30 minutes, I'm back. But I have showed up. Next day we'll see. That compounding works. Like not only in money. That is just philosophy. Sorry about
so Vikas, just one last question. Are you replacing Rohit Sharma for next Cricket World Cup?
Okay, so I tell you, and that also like yo-yo test, right? Like he had failed. And then I thought, okay, why people are failing this test, right? Then let me do it. One of the stats was around running also. So I have done that exact yo-yo test myself, and I had passed it. So
Why?
Maybe I thought if I would have got that exposure, maybe I would have become cricketer. And my son name is Virat, but last 3 years Virat wasn't in form, so right. Then he has developed his interest in football. So now yesterday his birthday was there. He was asking Messi's jersey, not Virat Kohli. So it's like cool.
Nice.
Asking for only jerseys.
Question around updates. I mean, as you have mentioned that there are like 4 cycles of updates, and if you are missing one of the cycles, we might lose the compatibility. And the infra like ours is like having 40 vCenters and having that much releases. How is there any additional things that you have developed or released to manage that upgrade cycle? I mean, it will eventually create the more workload for us, right? To upgrade and maintain in the compatible versions.
Okay, so that first thing I think we have to understand is that policy is not directly driven by VMware. It is influenced by the upstream Kubernetes world, right? So we have to be with them. Otherwise, the number of features they deliver like very faster. Every 4 months there is one release.
Because 2 years back, I mean, we were at 7.2 versions, and still one of my customers were using 5.1. With respect to that, I'm thinking, I mean, if there are still customers who are using 5.1, 5.5 or 6, and you are releasing 4 versions a year, I mean, how we will run along with, I mean.
Yeah, so I think this is shared by multiple customers. I believe internally also. I heard the things like Project Arctic, the life cycle management, right? Is one of the answers to that, right? So you don't need to worry about life cycle of vCenter. We will do it, right? That is one. VMware Cloud on AWS is another answer to it. It's entire service is given to you. You just worry about your business. That is second.
So you
Third,
have to cut short and we can connect each other, right? Offline. So you have
it
running
is third
out of
also.
time.
It's still internal.
Yeah,
So I will
sorry.
not talk about it.
So, thanks, Vikas. Thanks.